Ever wondered which Campbell's soups are the ones to avoid at all costs? And which two are still good? Picture opening that red and white can, expecting comfort, only to find watery broth or a flavor that takes you straight back to a disappointing lunchbox. But hidden among the flops are a couple of cans that still deliver. Want to guess which ones survived? Let's kick things off with a soup that promised Louisiana flair, but left you with swamp water in a can. Chicken gumbo. The word gumbo instantly brings to mind pots simmering away on the stove for hours. You picture onions, peppers, and celery mingling with smoky sausage, tender chicken, and rice, building flavor layer by layer until it feels like a full meal in one bowl. Gumbo should taste like a little party, spicy, smoky, and rich enough to carry you through a cold night. But when Campbell's decided to can that magic, what came out feels more like a sad puddle than a dish with soul. The broth is where it all falls apart. Instead of depth and spice, you get thin, gray liquid that tastes like someone waved a spice rack over hot water. The Cajun kick is missing. No paprika warmth, no garlic backbone, just salt and a faint metallic edge from the can. And those vegetables? In true gumbo, the holy trinity of onion, bell pepper, and celery sets the entire flavor foundation. Here, the peppers are limp, the celery turns to mush, and the onions dissolve into nothing. The chicken chunks are even worse. Tiny, stringy bits so dry you need the watery broth just to choke them down. Sure, the can is cheap, and it might tempt you as a pantry backup, but when you heat it up, the disappointment is immediate. Instead of filling your kitchen with spice and warmth, you get the smell of reheated salt water and vegetables past their prime. Could you fix it with extra chicken, vegetables, and Cajun seasoning? Maybe. But if you are going that far, you might as well make gumbo from scratch and actually enjoy it. Campbell's Chicken Gumbo wears the name, but none of the heart. Every spoonful just makes you imagine the real thing you could have had instead. So tell me, have you ever bought something just for the name, only to find out it was all label and no flavor? Rolling in next is the hearty classic that somehow makes beef taste like erasers and veggies like afterthoughts. Vegetable beef. On paper, this should be the ultimate comfort soup. A rich tomato base, tender chunks of beef, and garden vegetables working together to warm you from the inside out. It is the kind of soup your grandmother might ladle into bowls on a chilly night, served with bread for dipping. That is the dream. But Campbell's execution feels more like a shortcut gone wrong. The broth is thin, tangy, and oddly metallic. Instead of rich flavor that has been simmered into depth, it tastes like watered-down soy sauce sprinkled with too much salt. The vegetables are no help. Carrots collapse into mush, peas taste mealy, and potatoes dissolve into grainy clumps. The colorful medley pictured on the label shrinks down into sad, faded chunks floating around like afterthoughts. The real crime, though, is the beef. Those chewy gray cubes look like beef but taste like rubber. No juiciness, no seasoning, no satisfaction. It feels as if scraps were pressed together, canned, and called a day. Every bite is more work than reward. What makes it worse is that vegetable beef should be one of the easiest soups to get right. Even simple versions made at home carry a warmth and depth that Campbell's version never delivers. People still buy it because it looks reassuring on the shelf. Red label, hearty photo, the idea of a classic. But halfway through the bowl, most are left wishing they had chosen anything else. Yes, you could try fixing it by tossing in leftover roast beef, fresh vegetables, and real seasoning. But if you need to rebuild it completely, why bother buying it? Campbell's vegetable beef looks like a hug in a can, but tastes like betrayal in a bowl. So what about you? Have you ever trusted a classic product only to find out it was a letdown in every bite? Coming up is the casserole helper nobody asked to eat on its own. Pale and gloopy as ever, cream of celery. This soup has never pretended to be a star. Campbell's markets it as an ingredient, a base for casseroles, sauces, and potluck recipes. But the moment someone pours it into a bowl and heats it up, the truth comes out. It was never meant to be eaten on its own. What you get is a beige, glue-like substance that smells faintly like boiled weeds. The texture is thick and sticky, clinging to the spoon like paste. Instead of creamy smoothness, you find stringy bits of overcooked celery, the kind that catch between your teeth. And the flavor? Flat, watery, and vaguely vegetal, like cream that has lost its richness stirred into celery that has lost its crunch. Every spoonful reminds you this was built for casseroles, not comfort. Fresh celery can be crisp, peppery, and refreshing. Here, it has been cooked into submission, leaving behind only a shadow of itself. Even the smell when you heat it up is uninviting, metallic and green, more like canned spinach than anything appetizing. Yes, it is cheap, and yes, it has a role in recipes, but as a soup to actually eat, it is joyless. Every bite feels like forcing down casserole filler without the casserole. It is one of those cans that makes you wonder why it is even stocked in the soup aisle instead of the cooking ingredients section. So while some defend it as a base, it is an absolute failure as a standalone dish. Campbell's cream of celery deserves its spot on the avoid at all costs list. Have you ever tried eating something that clearly was never meant to stand on its own? Sliding into the mix is a wedding dish that turned celebration into salty disappointment, Italian wedding soup. The name alone sets the stage for something special. Wedding makes you think of tables filled with food, family gathered together, and flavors that feel rich, festive, and comforting. Traditional Italian wedding soup should be a blend of tender meatballs, leafy greens, and a clear, flavorful broth that ties everything together. It should taste like home. But when Campbell's got their hands on it, what should have been a celebration ended up more like an awkward family dinner that you just want to sneak out of early. The broth is the first red flag. Instead of being light but savory, it comes across thin yet aggressively salty. Take one spoonful and your taste buds immediately recognize that this is not balance. It is brine. You do not get the complexity of herbs, garlic, or onions simmered into the base. Instead, it is like the soup makers dumped in a salt shaker and called it seasoning. Then come the meatballs. You might expect plump, juicy bites of seasoned beef and pork. Something tender enough to fall apart with a press of the spoon, releasing bursts of flavor into the broth. Sadly, Campbell's version delivers meatballs that are rubbery, overprocessed, and bland. They are more filler than flavor, and their tiny size makes them feel like they were made to disappear quickly rather than stand out. They are not hearty, they are not satisfying, and they do not bring the kind of richness this soup is known for. The greens should be the saving grace. In a proper Italian wedding soup, the leafy greens, often escarole or spinach, add freshness and balance the heaviness of the meatballs. In Campbell's can, the greens feel wilted to the point of being slimy. They cling to the spoon in limp little strands, adding neither freshness nor flavor. It is almost like they were boiled, frozen, and reboiled before being sealed in the can. Now let us talk about the pasta. Traditionally, you get tiny pasta shapes, like acini di pepe, that float happily in the broth. They are supposed to bring a delicate texture, something to carry the soup without overshadowing it. But in Campbell's version, the pasta ends up mushy. It soaks up too much broth in the can, and by the time you heat it up, it collapses into soft, gummy bits that barely resemble pasta at all. And yet, this soup continues to tempt people. Maybe it is the picture on the label with its cheerful meatballs and bright green vegetables. Maybe it is the promise of something exotic compared to a basic chicken noodle. But every time you open the can, you get the same result: salt water with floating fillers. Some might try to argue that it is serviceable in a pinch, a quick meal when you are too tired to cook. But even then, there are better canned options out there. This one just cannot shake its spot on the avoid list, because when a soup that should feel like a warm family gathering ends up feeling more like cafeteria food gone wrong, you know it has failed its promise. So here's a thought. Have you ever had a dish with a name that sounded special only to realize the name was the best part? Now, here's a nostalgic throwback that fizzled into soggy pasta stars floating in watery broth, chicken and stars. For many people, this can bring back memories of childhood. It is the soup your parents might have given you when you were sick, or the one you saw in commercials with smiling kids spooning up star-shaped pasta. On paper, it is pure comfort food, but nostalgia can be tricky. What tasted magical when you were 5 does not always hold up when you are 50. The broth is where the letdown begins. Instead of a flavorful chicken stock, you get a watered-down base that tastes faintly of chicken but mostly of salt. There is no depth, no slow simmered richness. Just a thin liquid that barely carries the flavor. If you were hoping for a broth that feels nourishing and hearty, this one is more like sipping on warm, salty water. Then there are the stars themselves. As a kid, the pasta shapes felt fun and whimsical, But when you revisit them as an adult, you realize they are just tiny, mushy starches that fall apart after a few minutes of cooking. Instead of being a delightful texture, they dissolve into the broth, leaving behind a strange thickness that feels more gummy than satisfying. The chicken does not help much either. Small, shredded pieces float around, but they are dry and lack flavor. It feels more like they were added as an afterthought than as a real ingredient meant to carry the dish. You keep searching the spoon for something that tastes like real chicken, but what you find instead is disappointment. What makes chicken and stars tricky is the nostalgia factor. For a moment, when you open the can and smell that faint chicken aroma, you are transported back to childhood. But then you take a bite and the illusion shatters. It is not the same comfort you remember. It is a reminder that some things are better left in the past. Sure, if you are sick and need something easy on the stomach, it might do the job. It is mild, it is soft, and it is easy to eat. But that is about as much praise as it deserves. For a soup that has been around this long, you would hope it could deliver something more. And yet people still buy it. Not because it is good, but because it is tied to memories. That red and white can feel like a piece of childhood in your grocery cart. But when it comes to flavor and satisfaction, it is one to leave behind. So tell me, is there a food from your childhood that you tried again as an adult and instantly regretted? Up ahead is the thick green wall of mush that doubled as both dinner and cement. Split pea with ham. Split pea soup, when done right, can be wonderful. Imagine a pot simmering on the stove, filled with split peas, smoky ham, carrots, onions, and a broth that slowly thickens into something creamy and hearty. It is rustic, filling, and comforting, especially on a cold winter day. But Campbell's version? It is less comfort and more punishment. The first thing you notice is the texture. Instead of a smooth, velvety thickness, you get a paste-like sludge that sticks to the spoon in a way that makes you hesitate before taking a bite. It is so dense that it feels more like something you should spread on bread rather than eat with a spoon. That heaviness is not satisfying. It is overwhelming. And then there is the flavor. Split pea soup should have a balance of earthy peas and smoky ham. Campbell's delivers a soup that somehow leans too heavily on the wrong notes. The peas taste starchy and dull, while the ham flavor comes across more like liquid smoke than real smoked meat. The result is a strange, almost ashy taste that lingers unpleasantly after each bite. The ham pieces themselves do not help. Instead of chunks of tender, flavorful ham, you get little bits that are tough and rubbery. They feel more like scraps than real cuts of meat, and they bring more chewiness than they do flavor. Paired with the heavy texture of the soup, it is a battle to get through even half a bowl. Visually, it is no better. The green color is unappealing, and once heated, it tends to look like something you would not willingly serve to guests. Food should be inviting, but this soup's appearance alone makes it a tough sell. To be fair, some people might buy it because it is filling. It is dense enough to keep you full, but that fullness comes with regret. Because after finishing it, you do not feel comforted. You feel weighed down. Could you fix it? Maybe by thinning it with stock, adding fresh ham, and seasoning it properly. But again, if you have to rebuild a soup just to make it edible, it is not worth the can. So yes, Campbell's split pea with ham earns its spot as one of the soups to avoid. It is heavy, it is unpleasant, and it leaves you wondering how something so simple could go so wrong. What about you? Have you ever forced yourself to finish a meal just because you did not want to waste it? Wrapping up the avoid pile is a garden medley that tasted less like Italy and more like red dishwater. Minestrone. Minestrone should be one of the safest bets in the soup aisle. A hearty Italian vegetable soup, filled with beans, pasta, and bright vegetables in a tomato broth. Done well, it is earthy, rich, and nourishing, the kind of meal that can make you feel warm inside even on the coldest day. But Campbell's take on minestrone somehow missed the spirit entirely. Instead of comfort, it delivers a limp, watery disappointment that feels like it was rushed out the door before it had a chance to actually become soup. Let's start with the broth. Minestrone should taste of tomatoes, garlic, herbs, and simmered vegetables coming together. Campbell's broth tastes like watered-down tomato juice, flat and acidic. It has a thin consistency that never clings to the vegetables or pasta, leaving you with the sense that everything is just floating in red-tinted water. There is no depth, no rich base, and no aroma that would make you stop and say, This smells like dinner. The vegetables are another letdown. Real minestrone should celebrate the garden. Zucchini, carrots, beans, onions, maybe even a little cabbage. But here, the vegetables feel lifeless. They are overcooked to the point of being mushy, and whatever flavor they once had has been sacrificed to the canning process. Instead of a vibrant medley, you get limp chunks that all taste vaguely the same. And then there are the beans and pasta. Beans in minestrone should be hearty and creamy, adding substance to the broth. Instead, Campbell's beans are mealy, dry, and sometimes even chalky. The pasta, meanwhile, turns gummy and swollen, like it has been waiting far too long for someone to notice it. There's no bite, no texture, just soft starch dissolving into the broth. Visually, it is not inviting either. The bright reds and greens you would expect are replaced with muted colors that remind you more of faded leftovers than a fresh meal. It is the kind of soup you serve yourself in a bowl and then stare at, trying to convince yourself it might taste better than it looks. Now, some people might argue that it is cheap and filling. That is true. You do get a full bowl and it will keep you from feeling hungry. But filling is not the same as satisfying. This is one of those soups where halfway through you are already thinking about what else you could be eating instead. Could you fix it? Maybe if you drained out most of the broth and added fresh herbs, garlic, and vegetables. But again, that defeats the purpose of buying a ready-to-eat soup. If you have to rebuild it, what are you really paying for? So, while minestrone might look appealing on the shelf with its colorful label and Italian name, the can does not deliver on its promise. It is proof that not every classic deserves a spot in your pantry. So let me ask, have you ever been lured in by a food with a fancy name, only to end up regretting it with every bite? Turning to the good side, here's the warm, creamy partner that never lets a grilled cheese go lonely: tomato soup. This is one of those rare Campbell's cans that still holds its ground. The moment you see that red and white label with tomato in bold, you probably remember rainy afternoons, warm kitchens, and a sandwich grilling on the stove. It is the classic pairing: a steaming bowl of tomato soup with a gooey grilled cheese on the side. And while many other Campbell's soups have stumbled, this one remains a dependable favorite. The magic is in the simplicity. Tomato soup does not need to be complicated. It just needs to taste rich, smooth, and comforting. Campbell's manages to capture that with a velvety texture and a tomato flavor that, while not gourmet, is familiar and satisfying. It is slightly tangy, slightly sweet, and perfectly balanced when you dip in a buttered sandwich. Another thing that works in its favor is its adaptability. Some people make it with milk instead of water, giving it a creamier consistency. Others stir in fresh herbs, a pinch of spice, or even a splash of cream to elevate it. But even on its own, it is still perfectly enjoyable. Unlike the soups we have already talked about, you do not feel the need to fix it just to get through a bowl. And then there is nostalgia. Campbell's tomato soup has been a fixture in American kitchens for generations. For many, it is tied to childhood. Sick days when your mom or dad served it with crackers, or quick weekend lunches when nothing else seemed easy enough to make. The flavor is not just food, it is memory, and that makes it more powerful than the sum of its parts. Price-wise, it is still a bargain. A couple of dollars for a can that can stretch into multiple servings when paired with bread or sandwiches. That makes it one of the most reliable and affordable comfort meals out there. Now, is it perfect? Not quite. Some critics say it is too sweet, too simple, or too processed. But when you set expectations realistically, it does exactly what it promises. It gives you a smooth, comforting soup that pairs beautifully with a sandwich or even just some crackers. That is why, among all the cans to avoid, this one stands tall as one you can keep in your pantry without regret. Because sometimes the simplest things really do hold up the best. So tell me, when you think of tomato soup, do you picture it plain in a bowl or always next to a grilled cheese sandwich? And finally, let's celebrate the rare can that actually tastes like the seaside comfort it claims to be. Chunky New England Clam Chowder. Clam chowder is a risky dish to put in a can. It is supposed to be creamy, hearty, and full of tender clams, potatoes, and savory broth. Too often, canned chowders end up tasting like wallpaper paste with a hint of ocean. But Campbell's Chunky New England Clam Chowder manages to surprise you. It is not perfect, but it is closer than most to the real thing. First off, the texture is right. The broth is thick and creamy without being gluey. It coats the spoon, clings to the potatoes, and feels substantial in a way that makes each bite satisfying. You do not feel like you are eating mush. You feel like you are eating chowder. Then there are the clams. While some canned versions serve up rubbery little bits that taste more like the ocean floor than seafood, this one actually delivers pieces of clam that are tender and flavorful. They may not be the fresh catch of the day, but they hold their own in the bowl and add that briny sweetness chowder fans expect. The potatoes do their job too. They are firm enough to add substance without collapsing into mush, and they balance out the creaminess of the broth. Paired with bits of celery and seasoning, it comes together into a soup that feels hearty, filling, and surprisingly close to homemade. What makes this soup shine is how it hits the nostalgia button as well. For many people, New England clam chowder is tied to vacations by the sea, summer visits to the coast, or family dinners at seafood restaurants. Opening this can is like bringing a little of that memory home. Sure, it is not a bowl from a seaside shack in Cape Cod, but for something that comes out of a pantry, it does the job better than expected. Price-wise, it is a little more than the basic soups, but it is still affordable compared to buying chowder out at a restaurant. And because it is filling, one can actually feels like a full meal rather than just a starter. Of course, purists will say, it cannot compare to real clam chowder made fresh. That is true. But for a canned version, it earns respect. It tastes good, it feels hearty, and it proves that not every Campbell's soup deserves to be avoided. So if you are looking for a pantry staple that actually delivers on its promise, this is one of the few that deserves a spot on your shelf. So what about you? Have you ever been surprised by how good a canned soup turned out to be? And that's our ladle's journey through Campbell's highs and lows. Now I want to hear your pantry confessions in the comments, and if you had fun on this taste test tour, give this video a like and subscribe to the hidden menu so you never miss the next scoop.